Referring to costume agency within contemporary dance performance often evokes ideas related to fantastic creations rich either in scale, detail, or discovery. What often remains overlooked is the opposite, the mundane, even minimal costume, design concepts that draw from familiar elements yet evoke the agency through their contribution to the performance through another mechanism, agency that stems from the collaboration in the shaping of these concepts. This is where I argue our growing field of costume studies benefits from a more thorough analysis. I begin my presentation with a focus on the interaction and end it by an illustration of how the agency shaped by interaction materializes in my case studies. This presentation is based on my ongoing doctoral thesis project that investigates costume design within contemporary dance performance in the 21st century Finland. In line with the overall project, this presentation draws from my analysis of a series of personal interviews with distinguished Finnish costume designers since 2014. When the interviewed costume designers speak about their work within dance, they proactively speak of human interrelations. As part of these relations, they refer to listening to the team and its individuals, discussing concepts, negotiating views and practices, as well as scheduling the work according to timelines often set by others. As I argue, this type of interchange shape what I define as the agency of costume within design for contemporary dance performance. This means that agency, as I delineate it, unfolds as a capacity or potential to be unleashed within each performative context. This applies to a wide range of practices, but is particularly central to process-based approaches widely used in the making of contemporary dance performance, especially in the freelancer productions outside institutions. To better understand how interchange invites agency, I summarize the main sites of communication together with the key functions of these sites. The costume designer interrelates with the choreographer. The choreographer articulates the starting point of the performance for the team, including the costume designer. This may take place in various constellations of meetings, either with the whole team, including the performers, the artistic team without the performers, or between the choreographer and the designers in one-to-one dialogues. The amount and characteristics of information varies, hence offering variant settings for the designers to engage with their work. For the costume designer, the performing bodies are paramount. Hence the designer interrelates with the performers. As my interviews indicate, costume concepts are created to specific bodies, bodies that the designer already knows or learns to know during the process. In this way, through a considered interaction, the costume concepts draw their strength from a deep understanding of the performance brought to life by the performing bodies. In addition to these, the space, sound, and lighting provide the costume designer with further information on how to develop their work. However, based on the costume designer interviews, these interrelations take place on the side, yet in alignment with what is shared with the choreographer and the performers. Out of these three key sites for communication for the designer, based on my research, what most influences the design concept is the costume designer's interchange with the choreographer and furthermore, the choreographer's general interestedness in the costume. Analyzing the depictions of the three main interviewees indicates two models of interchange/collaboration with slightly varying strategies for shaping the costume agency. In the first model, the costume designer is aware of the choreographer's limited interest in or capability to communicate costume-related ideas early in the process. Here, the costume designer either, in spoken words, actively advocates costume ideas for the choreographer to ground the design, Or, as a second strategy, the designer actively advocates costume by independently developing concepts based on the information at hand. This approach relies on a high level of trust and mutual respect. In both variations, the designer maintains the dialogue with the choreographer throughout the process. In the second model, the costume designer is aware of the choreographer's interest in costume-related ideas already early in the process. Hence, the costume designer enters a dialogue with the choreographer early and develops the initial ideas, the concepts that best support the performance. Also in this model, the dialogue continues throughout the process. While previous research has identified costume design in contemporary dance that seems external or imposed to the performance, meaning the costume agency doesn't support but rather works against the performance, I argue such agency indicates a lack of communication between the team. As the same scholars propose, in order to avoid such an imbalanced agency, the costume design needs to be introduced early in the process. I agree with this. However, a common solution for enhancing the early introduction of costume has been to suggest strengthening its agency with and by, as Jessica Bugg terms it, quote, costume innovations, end quote. This translating mainly as costumes that in various ways generate movement and indeed perform, even occupy the stage with a magnified presence. My argument, with which I seek to broaden the current discussion, is to claim for the agency of costume also when it is not primarily invited in the process to bring in, quote, innovation, end quote. To accentuate this effect, I draw from examples where costume may appear to some eyes bare or minimal. This steers the focus of understanding costume agency from the costume outcome to the design process. Furthermore, it proposes new ways for reading previous research on collaboration in costume design. Highlighting the agency of costume through the process rather than the outcome, a careful contextual reading of costume within performance shows how a mundane, everyday-like costume may both generate and justify movement in rather subtle ways. Furthermore, it may make use of sensory strategies in an open-ended manner, and by these means work towards a holistic experience for the makers, performers, and audiences alike. To aspire the delivery of such an experience, this particular understanding of costume agency stresses the interrelation between the costume designer and the team. It allows the costume concept to be shaped as an organic contribution as part of the overall process, in line with the choreography and other elements of the performance. In so doing, it allows costume to claim its equal agency in the easily underrated form of everyday garments. Everyday garments in all their familiarity enable fresh and poignant associations when the costume agency is rooted in a rich and reciprocal interchange between the team of the performance makers. The collaborative process, where the designer should take an active and encouraging role, hence shapes how and what type of agency the costume concept may use in the performance. Here, the outcome may make use of a wide range of qualities, such as those previously connected to costume in contemporary dance. Abstracted aesthetic symbolism, physical, experiential, and kinesthetic engagement with the body in movement, and an embodied, active, and experiential potential of the costume, etc. Such agency is visible, for example, in my case study of costume designer Karolina Koisokanttila's design work in dance performances choreographed by Karl Kniff. In many of their collaborations, where they make use of everyday garments, the agency of the costume starts from how the costume proposes a set of first-level sociocultural implications. This means immediate associations based on everyday garments and a pragmatic view of what these costumes can do. However, in the layered entity of the performance as a whole, the seemingly simple costume choices contribute to the dramaturgy in paramount ways. In, for example, the performance The Emotional Life of a Dog, What My Father Said, shifting between dark formal coats, knitwear and trousers for two male performers, in combination with a female nightgown and a late 1980s style windbreaker jacket, create a storyline where each change in the costume occurs in an intrinsic dialogue with what is proposed on the stage.
One day, I'll make a cradle out of my arms and wrap you against my chest in that little nest close to my heart that belongs to you. I'll put my hard forehead against your soft one, so I'll know that you are here. I'll say to you out loud, I am here. And we are here, both of us, as your heart beats as fast as mine beats hard. And I promise I'll always be here, so close. But we'll both know that we are here.
As this presentation aims to indicate, the understanding of how costume performs deserves to be understood in the widest possible sense. The power of costume, even when it appears stripped down or minimal, is rooted in how it is used in the performative context. In what I propose, the preceding interchange appears as a key to understand how the costume agency has been defined and what are the ramifications in the costume outcome. How costume performs, either in a fantastic or familiar form, stems from the milieu for the creation and the development of the concept, not alone, but in interaction that invites the agency of costume.